This is Stephanie at Hightower Stitching with today's video, which is based on a quilt block from the McCall September 2018 magazine. And I went through my magazines and I was looking for something different to do, and I spotted this block. And then when you first look at it, you can see that it's a log cabin. Well, it's a little different, and so what I have today is 3 strategies that you can choose from or use to attack a block like this. As I looked at the block, I saw that it was going to be a little bit different, and back to my adage of, we'll try a block, see if you like it, see if you can put colors together that'll work. And so this is the first block that I made, and that's how I got the 3 different ideas that might help you when you get ready to do something. And it wouldn't have to be this block, but when you know you're taking on one that's a little different from what you've done, it would be a lot simpler or a lot different than what we just did with the stars and the tumbling blocks, because for that one we just needed this one piece plus a little half of one of these to make the whole quilt. And the biggest thing there was just punching the dots and sewing along the lines. So I hope you enjoy this as we look at the 3 different ideas to help you do a different kind of quilt block. And if that doesn't give you some ideas of what's coming, look at the second block that I did, and you can see that I changed it up. And what really was an accident, because we were fixing to leave the house, and as I walked out the door, I knew I wanted to make another block. I keep all my black and white material in one little box, and I grabbed it and I said, I'm going to make something with this, and this is what turned out. And as you look at the box, a little bit of the anatomy of the box, you've got your center, which the log cabins always do, but this one has got another 2-inch block right underneath it, and we'll look at that in a minute. But you'll notice the strips, borrow my friend here from part 1, these are 2-inch width. These are 1.5-inch width. There are a lot of pieces to this, and that's what I wanted to help get organized and then to keep going. And the funny thing is, the first one that I did, I just followed my rules. I followed my organization. And actually, when I got done, I wasn't even looking. I'd sewed on the last piece. Later, I came back to press it, and I had turned it wrong. And you'd say, how could you turn a pink and a white wrong? But I did, and I just had to get out the old seam ripper and take it out and hand stitch it again. And these were hand stitched. It would be easy to do on the machine, but I just wanted to do it hand stitched. So here we go. Some of you may say, there's something wrong with that lady. Well, I want you to realize I taught for a long time, and when I saw that block, I said, I've got to really study on this. And that's what I did. I grabbed a piece of big white paper, and you can put a couple pieces of freezer paper together. This did more good, a starting place for organizing, because I even did that before I started my first block. And if you go into the center, you'll see there's the one called center color and the one under there called a light color. Well, all the way through my chart, the light color is going to be the white or the other color that I choose to go down the diagonal part. Down here on the left, that's those 2-inch strips. And they each have a light on the end. If you look at the bottom section, and when you go over to the left-hand section, the light's at the top. All right, and then if you travel over to the right-hand part, these are 1.5-inch strips, plus a light strip that would be added to it. So you'll notice I've got my arrows, because you can do this counterclockwise. No, clockwise. Take that back. Clockwise. You'll see it's clockwise. Going from the center, adding on B, going up and adding on C, and then adding on D on the side, and you just keep going around and around and around. So that was my first one to help me get started. And when you start looking at colors, I looked up log cabin centers, and one of the sites said that red is a symbol of the hearth of home, and that yellow was a welcoming light in the window. And there's several other colors that have been symbolized different ideas from time on. And I looked up too, when was the first log cabin block? When were they found? And it said that there was a log cabin pattern appeared in an English quilt that predated 1930. I mean 1830. That's even older. The block we're looking at is going to be a 14-inch block, and we're going to travel clockwise from the pink center. So the next thing we want to do is pick our colors. And it's really funny because what you end up doing is going down through your 2-inch blocks and cutting, and then going up through your 1.5-inch. But there's actually, that white line makes a divide, and you can do some interesting things with the colors on each side. You don't have to think they all have to be in the same family. I tried to make mine go from a light to a dark to frame the outside. That's the only way I did on those. So for the next block that I started, I said I'm going to take and I'm going to use a color for that strip instead of a white this time. And this is a real pale green. And I just started going with my 2-inch pieces, and I said, well, I'm going to start with something light, and then something that'll go with that, and then something that will go that, and a solid seems to add. The fourth color going out is this flowered color that I have right here that I'm going to cut in a minute. That was one side. This is going to be funny. So the next side goes out. I've got a light green, a dark green, a light purple, and a dark purple. So you can see I've really got two different sections going. I put the brown in the middle because I'm thinking that's going to be my center block. I've had two colors that I was playing with to do that, and use something that would go with the colors that I was using. And that was choosing your fabrics. That's a lot of fun because it's almost like thinking of a scrappy quilt, that you choose things that you already have. Now the book copy, it made a 6x7 block quilt that took over 8 yards of backing and 42 blocks. And so you might want to do that first block and then decide what, if you're making a lap quilt, a throw blanket, or something like that before you cut out all 42. All right, let's just review a little bit on the cutting, because part one is pretty much just getting ready. And then part two, if you're still interested in this one, I'm going to start the sewing. So here is that fourth color that I was telling you about. And what I want is for this particular block, I want to make sure that my material doesn't stretch. So if you have your salvage line, you can take and pull it, and just for your own sake, and find out that that is not going to stretch. If you go the other way, you can see what's going to happen if you're not careful when you press too. Now what I want to do is I want to get ready to cut a strip, and this one I've already edged up. But lots of times when you have it, or you have a scrap piece, find the edge where it doesn't stretch. And I want to suggest for this quilt that you take and you use a mat, a good ruler, and your cutter, rotary cutter, because I did the first one with scissors and a regular ruler, and it was not nice. So to straight though, I'm going to take this ruler, I'm going to lay it down on the very end of that salvage, and it doesn't matter where I do it. I don't want to do it on the end, but because I can see the line, and I can see my black line, and I line it up. Well, you can see that I already have this one cut because it was jagged, and I took my rotary cutter and I cut off that piece. So now I know I've got a straight edge. And that's if you don't have a salvage on that end. All right, so I know that's straight. I'm going to just go ahead and see if this edge is straight. Now I know it's straight. line up my black line, travel down here, and this one just happened to be straight, nice and straight, so I'm ready to cut. This one happened to be a 2-inch strip, and so you can look at the measurements for how much it takes, and you can take your 2-inch strip, but you're really only going to make 2 pieces. And what I want to say is go ahead and cut your strip. Start with the longest strip first. And once you get that, let's say that it was 8.5, and that was the longest one, and the other one was going to be 9. So what I did was I stacked my 9 with the other one on top of it, and that's all I needed for that block. Then I was ready to go to the next color. I did the same thing for the 2-inch, and then I stacked it until I had all 4 colors stacked. I didn't have to label them or mark them, but it's really, there's not much difference between 7.5 and 8, and you don't want to be feeling for all of your pieces to do that. Now we're going to look at a way to organize your cutting. This is my strategy, my second strategy, and this is related to cutting the fabrics. There are a lot of pieces, so I actually went and made a chart, and so that you can see it, I'm going to start right here, the log cabin variation with a white diagonal, and I'm piecing it. The first one, this is all related to making one block. If you look, the green arrow says, here's my white and cream, or whatever your really light color is. You want 9 2x2s, that's A. You've got 1 2x3.5, and that's B. Then all of a sudden it changes to 1.5, and there are 4 sections of those, and those are the letters. All right, then I did the left block, which are the 2-inchers, and if you look at the very last one, see it says 10.5 inches by 2 by 12 inches, and that is where I stacked the shorter one on top of the longer one. And you don't have to label those with the letters because you already know those. Then do your right hand block. They're 1.5, the right hand corner. And then when you finally get done, go back and look and see if you figure out what you want for your very center, because we can't start without the center. So this is my stack of the lightest, and you can see that I did put the letter on there because they are all very similar, and I wanted to not have to get my ruler out and measure every time, make sure I had the right one, so I left those in stacks. And then I picked the brown center to use to sew with. All right, and then I have my 2 sides cut from the longest, thickest on the left-hand stack going up, and then again for the right-hand corner for those going up. The last thing that I did, this is strategy 3, and you might think that's a lot of typing, but it's really not. And really, down deep when I was doing it for myself, but I was also trying to think of a way that I could help you to do some strategies that I've used in the past and used in this one successfully, I think. And at the very beginning, these are actually my directions for how I'm going to sew it. That if I didn't have the book, which you may not have a book, or I didn't have that big chart, I could just go on. Now back to the big chart, you could see I actually made the strips the color they were, the dimensions they were. My plan was, if I liked this, and I was going to make more blocks, then I would be, as I made the colors, I would be putting those on the chart. And, if you're making 42, you could take and cut 42 2x12s and put them in the right place, and you'd have it to pick up as you went. And that's why that's so big. Then back to this chart. But I also did with this chart, but as it got better and better, and I wanted to know what went with what, I actually did those. So, like to begin, it says take your colored solid A 2-inch block, stack it on top of the white 2-inch block. Now, the orientation of your center is important because you want the colored block facing north and the white block facing south when you get it. And of course, the first time I did it, I said, what's wrong with this? I didn't notice that. And that's why I share some of these. So there it is, stack A over A, put B on the west side, go north and put C and then do D, and that worked really well. So I went down and I did round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4, and you are finally done with that really charming block. So to end this segment, I want to show you, I still only had a box of black fabric. I said I'm going to try another variation of this, and if you look, going down the center, instead of solid white or a speckly white, I used something with a little bit of a pattern in it. And for my center block, I picked one of the motifs and cut it. It was actually just a 2-inch. It fit perfectly. And if you don't notice, I've got puppy paws, and I've got the chevron looking, which I could have run the other way, would have looked differently. And it's the same way with this strip up here. I could have run them the other way, but I chose to go with the long strip. And our consensus so far has been at home that this is the block we like the best. And that's really nice because I like how it all goes together. But this is a really nice block to do. And this was sort of a bust the block, an organizational with 3 parts, coming up with the chart that I could follow, cutting the fabrics carefully, and then came up with a sewing way that I was going to sew that, because this was a lot different from the other one. And I'm going to go ahead and have a part 2 next week where I'm going to be sewing the quilt together so you can see what happens with the lights and going around and around. Thank you for watching. Any notes that I have will be added in the description. If this has been fun or helpful to you, or you have any comments, please leave those. Hit subscribe and also like. Thank you for watching.